The heavy iron gates of the high school creaked open as the morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete courtyard. Hundreds of students flooded the hallways, their chatter creating a familiar, chaotic drone that filled the air. Inside the homeroom of Class 2-3, the teacher cleared his throat loudly to capture everyone's fleeting attention. He announced that a new transfer student would be joining them today, causing a sudden wave of whispers to ripple through the rows. The classroom door slid open smoothly, and a slender boy stepped quietly across the threshold. Ji-jun stood before the chalkboard, his exceptionally handsome face perfectly framed by his dark, messy hair. His neat school uniform hung loosely on his remarkably thin and delicate frame, giving him an air of fragile grace. Instantly, several girls in the front row gasped softly, their eyes widening at his striking appearance. Without offering a single word of introduction, Ji-jun simply bowed his head in a polite, minimal greeting. The teacher pointed toward an empty desk located in the very back corner of the room near the window. Ji-jun walked down the narrow aisle silently, his soft footsteps making absolutely no sound against the tiled floor. As he passed the middle row, several delinquent boys glared at him with immediate, unprovoked hostility. The silent boy arrived at his assigned seat, gently pulled out the wooden chair, and sat down without a word. He stared out into the blue sky through the glass panel, wishing more than anything to remain completely invisible. The moment the lunch bell finally rang, a small group of enthusiastic girls rushed over to surround his desk. Sujin introduced herself with a bright smile, asking him friendly questions about his previous neighborhood. Ji-jun merely offered a brief, polite nod, keeping his eyes downward to avoid making prolonged eye contact. From across the crowded classroom, Hyuk-soo watched the interaction while slamming his heavy fist hard onto his table. The local bully could not tolerate seeing the popular girls fawn so intensely over a weak, skinny newcomer. Hyuk-soo signaled his two loyal lackeys with a cruel jerk of his chin, and the trio began moving toward the back corner. Sensing the immediate danger, the surrounding girls quickly scattered away from Ji-jun's desk in a panic. Hyuk-soo arrived at the desk and slammed both of his large palms heavily onto the smooth wood, leaning in close. Ji-jun did not flinch or blink, remaining completely motionless as the shadow of the massive bully fell over him. Hyuk-soo demanded to know why a fragile little rat like him thought he could act so arrogant on his very first day. The transfer student chose to ignore the question entirely, turning his gaze back toward the scenic view outside the window. Enraged by this blatant disrespect, Hyuk-soo swept his arm across the desk, violently knocking Ji-jun's leather bag to the floor. The black bag unzipped upon impact, sending loose papers and a heavy, plain black textbook sliding across the tiles. Ji-jun quietly stood up from his chair, bending down on one knee to carefully retrieve his scattered belongings. Seizing the opportunity, Hyuk-soo deliberately placed his heavy leather shoe firmly onto the black textbook, pinning it down. He sneered downward, telling Ji-jun that if he wanted his book back, he would have to bark like a dog first. The entire classroom fell into a suffocating dead silence as everyone watched the humiliation unfold. Sujin gripped her desk tightly, desperately wishing a teacher would walk back into the room to stop them. Ji-jun stopped moving his hand, his fingers resting just millimeters away from the edge of the trapped book. For a fraction of a second, a dark, terrifying glint flashed deep within his usually vacant pupils. He slowly stood back up to his full height, dusting off his uniform trousers with a remarkably calm, rhythmic motion. He looked directly into Hyuk-soo's aggressive eyes and softly asked the bully to move his foot away immediately. Hyuk-soo burst out into a loud, mocking laugh, completely amused by the skinny kid's quiet attempt at defiance. The massive bully raised his heavy right hand high, curling it into a solid fist to strike the transfer student down. He swung the heavy fist directly toward Ji-jun's face with a ferocious speed that tore sharply through the air. But right before the heavy punch could connect, a faint metallic buzzing sound suddenly echoed loudly from deep within Ji-jun's blazer pocket. The vibration of the phone inside the dark blazer pocket grew increasingly intense with each passing second. The muscular bully paused mid-swing as his knuckles hovered mere inches away from Ji-jun's flawless face. Ji-jun sighed quietly as the persistent ringing noise shattered the heavy silence of the narrow alleyway. The leader of the delinquents barked an angry order for his thugs to surround the silent teenager completely. Without breaking eye contact, Ji-jun slowly slid his slender hand into his left pocket to retrieve the glowing device. The spectators gasped as they noticed the phone screen flashing with an unknown, encrypted alphanumeric code. The massive bully laughed mockingly, assuming the quiet boy was trying to call for help at the last minute. Ji-jun flipped the phone into silent mode without even answering the call, his eyes turning dead and mechanical. The main attacker lost his patience and lunged forward with a violent wide right hook aimed at Ji-jun's temple. In a fraction of a second, Ji-jun tilted his head back just enough to let the heavy fist graze the air. The bully's eyes widened in sheer disbelief as his full-force attack completely failed to connect with the target. Ji-jun countered instantly with a lightning-fast palm strike directly to the larger boy's exposed ribcage. A sickening crack echoed through the brick corridor as the bully gasped for breath and doubled over in agony. The remaining delinquents froze in their tracks, their confident smiles instantly vanishing from their faces. Ji-jun stood perfectly upright, adjusting his school collar with an unsettling aura of absolute calmness. Two thugs broke from their trance and pulled out heavy metal pipes from behind a stack of wooden pallets. They rushed forward simultaneously, swinging the blunt weapons in a desperate attempt to overwhelm the teenager. Ji-jun stepped forward into the oncoming attacks rather than retreating into the tight corner. He grabbed the first attacker's wrist and twisted it brutally until the metal pipe clattered to the floor. Using the momentum, Ji-jun executed a powerful spinning heel kick that connected perfectly with the second thug's jaw. The second attacker spun through the air before crashing heavily into a pile of discarded cardboard boxes. The last remaining bully fell to his knees, his entire body shaking uncontrollably as he stared at the monster before him. Ji-jun looked down at the weeping boy with eyes completely devoid of empathy or human warmth. The mysterious smartphone in his pocket began to vibrate aggressively once again, breaking the terrifying stillness. He answered the phone this time, pressing the cold glass screen tightly against his ear without saying a word. A distorted, heavily synthesized voice on the other end delivered a cryptic message about an ongoing asset hunt. The voice stated that Ji-jun's location had been compromised by an elite underworld syndicate tracking the device. "Clear the area immediately if you want to keep your identity hidden," the caller warned before abruptly disconnecting. Ji-jun slid the phone back into his blazer pocket and stepped over the unconscious body of the bully leader. From the shadows of the adjacent rooftop, a hidden figure in a dark techwear jacket watched his every move. The observer tapped an earpiece, reporting to a superior that the target possessed high-level martial arts capabilities. Ji-jun emerged from the narrow corridor onto the main street, blending instantly into the evening crowd of pedestrians. Despite his calm exterior, his mind raced as he analyzed the true origins of the encrypted phone he had found. The device was clearly linked to an underground information network operating far beneath the city's surface. He had transferred schools to escape his violent past, yet trouble had found him on his very first day. Suddenly, a black luxury sedan with tinted windows pulled up violently along the curb just a few feet ahead of him. The heavy doors of the vehicle flew open, revealing men dressed in immaculate, identical dark-tailored suits. A massive enforcer stepped forward, his eyes scanning Ji-jun with cold, professional malice. Ji-jun shifted his weight smoothly onto his back foot, preparing his body for another inevitable confrontation. But before anyone could move, a sudden blinding searchlight from a nearby rooftop slammed directly onto the center of the street. The blinding searchlight cut through the midnight darkness and pinned Ji-jun directly in its center. Dust motes danced frantically in the brilliant white beam as the surrounding alley fell completely silent. Ji-jun slowly raised his left hand to shield his eyes from the overwhelming glare. From the edge of the rooftop, a heavy silhouette stepped into the light, looking down like a predator. The man leapt down effortlessly, his heavy leather boots cracking against the concrete pavement with a loud thud. He straightened his posture, revealing a sharp-tailored suit underneath a long, dark trench coat. This formidable newcomer was Daeshik, an elite enforcer known throughout the criminal underworld for his ruthless efficiency. Daeshik reached into his pocket, pulled out a photograph, and stared coldly at Ji-jun. He demanded the immediate return of a highly classified black cell phone that had gone missing during the previous brawl. Ji-jun kept his hands shoved deeply inside his school uniform pockets, remaining completely unbothered by the threat. He simply claimed he had no idea what kind of phone the enforcer was talking about. Daeshik laughed loudly, a hollow and dangerous sound that echoed off the brick walls around them. Without warning, the enforcer lunged forward, closing the distance between them in the blink of an eye. A powerful straight punch tore through the air directly toward Ji-jun's face. Ji-jun tilted his head just a fraction of an inch, letting the fist graze his dark hair. Daeshik instantly converted his missed momentum into a brutal spinning back kick. Seeing the heavy boot coming, Ji-jun dropped his school bag to block the incoming trajectory. The heavy leather boot slammed into the backpack, sending textbooks and papers exploding into the air. Utilizing the momentary shield of loose papers, Ji-jun slipped backward into the deep shadows. Daeshik swatted the fluttering papers away, his eyes scanning the darkness with growing irritation. Ji-jun silently grabbed a discarded steel pipe resting against a nearby dumpster. He didn't use it to strike, but instead dragged it along the concrete wall to create a screeching distraction. The horrific sound rattled Daeshik's focus, making him spin around toward the left. Ji-jun immediately struck from the opposite side, delivering a lightning-fast sweep across the enforcer's ankles. The iron pipe connected heavily, forcing the seasoned criminal down to one knee. Daeshik smiled through the pain, realizing this teenager was far more tactical than he looked. He suddenly reached inside his coat, drawing a heavy brass knuckle set that glinted under the moon. The fight escalated instantly into a whirlwind of metal against metal as Daeshik launched a flurry of short punches. Ji-jun felt the immense raw physical power behind every single strike vibration traveling through the pipe. Realizing his weapon was about to break, Ji-jun deliberately jammed the pipe into a nearby electrical fuse box. A massive electrical short circuit erupted, blinding both fighters with a brilliant flash of blue light. Total darkness immediately consumed the entire block, as the main power grid blew out completely. Daeshik stumbled blindly in the blackness, his eyes struggling to adjust to the sudden lack of visibility. Ji-jun, however, relied entirely on his heightened tactical senses honed from countless hidden battles. He moved like a ghost through the pitch blackness, his footsteps making absolutely zero sound. Slipping behind the enforcer, Ji-jun executed a precise strike right to the back of Daeshik's neck. Daeshik groaned as the breath was forced from his lungs, staggered by the perfect precision of the blow. Heavy footsteps suddenly echoed from the main street as a fleet of black luxury sedans arrived. Dozens of suited syndicate men carrying tactical flashlights poured out of the vehicles. Recognizing the overwhelming reinforcements, Ji-jun snatched his damaged backpack and scaled the opposite fence in seconds. Daeshik leaned against the wall, spitting blood onto the ground while his subordinates surrounded him with lights. He growled into his radio, ordering an all-out manhunt for the high school student across the entire district. Safely blocks away, Ji-jun walked down a quiet residential street, his school uniform tattered and dirty. Suddenly, his hand brushed against a strange object concealed inside the inner lining of his torn backpack pocket. He pulled out a sleek, glowing black smartphone that he had unknowingly pocketed during the initial classroom brawl. The screen suddenly flashed a crimson warning message, along with a ticking digital countdown timer. A synthetic electronic voice leaked from the speaker, stating that his coordinates were now being broadcasted to every illegal fighter in the city. Far down the dark road, multiple pairs of glowing red motorcycle headlights suddenly ignited in perfect unison. The loud synchronized roar of heavy engines revving began to echo threateningly through the quiet night air. Ji-jun gripped the mysterious glowing device tightly, realizing that a massive trap had just been sprung upon him. The glowing device in Ji-jun's hand vibrated with a menacing frequency as the shadowy warehouse doors opened. Heavy footsteps echoed from the cavernous interior, drawing him deeper into the trap. Dozens of syndicate thugs stood in the shadows, their eyes gleaming with cold malice. At the center of the makeshift arena stood Boss Kang, a massive adult gangster covered in jagged tattoos. Kang spat on the floor and tossed a pair of weighted leather gloves toward Ji-jun's feet. Ji-jun unbuttoned his high school blazer and neatly folded it over a nearby metal railing. He stepped into the spotlight, his expression entirely void of fear or hesitation. Without warning, Kang lunged forward like a rabid beast, throwing a devastating right hook. Ji-jun tilted his head back by a mere fraction of an inch, letting the massive fist graze his hair. The syndicate crowd gasped as the boy seamlessly evaded the opening blitz. Infuriated by the miss, Kang unleashed a rapid flurry of brutal heavy strikes. Ji-jun parried each blow with minimal effort, his hands moving with surgical precision. He read the older fighter's rigid posture and spotted a massive opening in his stance. Ji-jun drove a lightning-fast counter-palm strike directly into Kang's exposed ribs. The giant man groaned loudly, stumbling backward several steps into a stack of wooden crates. Grinning through the pain, Kang reached behind his back and pulled out a heavy steel pipe. The spectating syndicate members began to close in, narrowing the boundaries of the arena. Ji-jun merely adjusted his footing, completely unfazed by the sudden shift to lethal weapons. Kang swung the pipe horizontally, aiming to shatter the young student's skull. Ji-jun ducked under the weapon, the metal whistling harmlessly over his head. He instantly pivoted and delivered a ferocious spinning backkick straight to Kang's jaw. The massive gangster was lifted off his feet, crashing heavily onto the cold concrete. Seeing their leader fall, 3 armed thugs broke formation and rushed Ji-jun at once. Ji-jun's eyes flashed with a terrifying darkness as his monstrous instincts fully awakened. He intercepted the first attacker, disarming him with a brutal wristlock maneuver. Using the disarmed thug as a shield, he blocked a swinging baseball bat from the second opponent. Ji-jun leaped into the air, executing a flawless double knee strike onto the third attacker's chest. Within seconds, all 3 attackers lay unconscious and groaning on the floor. He slowly turned his gaze back to the remaining syndicate members, who took a collective step back. Boss Kang struggled back to his feet, coughing up blood while holding a concealed switchblade. With a final, desperate roar, the syndicate leader charged for one last lethal stab. Ji-jun sidestepped the blade with absolute composure, letting it pass inches from his chest. He grabbed Kang's extended arm, snapped it downward over his shoulder, and delivered a decisive elbow strike. The legendary syndicate champion collapsed face first onto the concrete, completely defeated. Absolute silence enveloped the massive warehouse as the entire underworld empire fell paralyzed. Ji-jun walked over to the guardrail and picked up his school blazer, slipping it back on. The remaining syndicate elders bowed their heads in submission, acknowledging the shift in power. He walked toward the exit, knowing the local underworld would never dare bother him again. Stepping outside, he saw the early morning sun rising beautifully over the city skyline. With his hidden strength proven and his peaceful school life finally secured, the silent monster smiled softly.